Danjin, the Scarlet Shade, was born on the 31th of August in Wuthering, and I don't know why I tell you this, but honestly, I have no funny idea on how to start this video. She is a sword-wielding Havoc DPS who trades her own health in exchange for damage buffs and tops not only the charts for being the best unit to solo holograms with, but also the best unit to die with. We will cover her skills, the sponsor of today's video, her best weapons, echoes, echo skills and echo sets, her sequence notes, her best teams and how to play her correctly. Let's go! Special thanks to Sweet Tilly for taking her time and helping me out with this guide. Check her out, a link is in the description. Danjin has the usual heavy attack, mid-air attack, dodge counter and features a 3-part basic attack which plays heavily into her combo, alternating between basics and her resonance skill, which changes how it works depending on when it is used. Regardless, using her resonance skill reduces her current HP by 3% or 6% for Crimson Erosion if used after a dodge counter and only if you have her inherent skill Crimson Light unlocked. Her skill has no cooldown and, as previously mentioned, behaves differently depending on when it is used. While the usual effect Carmine Gleam deals some minor damage using it after basic attack 2, dodge counter or her intro skill, she has her perform Crimson Erosion instead, which can be cast consecutively up to twice, and the second hit will apply Incinerating Will on target's hit. Incinerating Will is a debuff which lasts 12 seconds and increases Danjin's damage dealt against marked targets by 20%. This debuff is very important to apply as soon as possible and keep it up at all times. Using her skill after her basic 3 instead will have you perform Sanguine Pulse instead, which can be recast consecutively up to 3 times. It should also be noted you can use her skill outside of combat to generate Forte for her, which is especially useful for hologram fights. For her Resonance Liberation, Crimson Bloom, it is a mega nuke on a 16 seconds cooldown, costs 100 Resonance Liberation energy and generates the usual 20 Concerto. Her Forte Circuit has her accumulate up to 120 Ruby Blossoms whenever her Resonance skill is used. While you can hold basic attack to cast Chaos Cleave and following that Scatter Bloom already at 60 Ruby Blossoms, damage dealt by both is increased massively if cast when at maximum 120 Ruby Blossoms. Chaos Cleave will consume all Ruby Blossoms, will deal significant heavy attack damage, heal Danjin, and can be followed up directly after with Scatter Bloom by pressing her basic attack, which will also inflict massive damage as well. Chaos Cleave also generates a fantastic 50 Concerto and 14 Resonance Liberation energy, whereas Scatter Bloom generates 6 energy for your ultimate. This also means if you are low on health, and to be honest you will be all the time, it is Danjin after all, and you need the healing to not die, using her Forte early as emergency food. Healing to not die is a valid exchange for losing some damage. However, if you're good at dodging and parrying, using Chaos Cleave at full Forte is nearly always the better choice. Her intro deals medium to minor damage and generates 10 Concerto. Her outro grants 23% Havoc damage amplification to the next character switched in. For her inherent skill Crimson Light, as already previously mentioned, it doubles the health cost of her skill but also increases the damage dealt by Crimson Erosion if used directly after her dodge counter and the amount of Ruby Blossoms accumulated by her skill. However, this also only applies if used directly after a dodge counter. Her second passive, Overflow, grants her 30% heavy attack damage after casting her resonance skill Sanguine Pulse. Knowing how Danjin's kit works, we can now start to look at her damage distribution. But wouldn't it be great if you could write a program for yourself to do all of these calculations? Or even better, program even your own game with fantastic gameplay such as Wuthering Waves? Well, you can, thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Boot.dev. Boot.dev offers online, self-paced programming courses focusing on backend development in a unique approach similar to a captivating RPG game. You will earn XP, levels, achievements and complete quests to get a spot on the global leaderboard, all while you will learn backend development in Python and Go. Their platform is designed to get you writing a ton of code, because getting your hands on the keyboard and shipping projects is honestly the only and best way to really learn. If you ever get stuck on a challenge, Boot.dev has a very active Discord community to help you out. And the best part is, they never want any student feel like they spent money on something that isn't helping them. Which means they do offer you a 30-day no questions asked refund policy, as well as a free demo of every course and all the interactive features. Kickstart your new development career now and click the link in the description box and use my code iamrivenous to get 25% off your first payment for Boot.dev. That's 25% for your first month or your first year, depending on the subscription you choose. That said, let's now actually have a look at her damage distribution and her skill priority. A sizable chunk of her damage is heavy attack damage, which comes from her forte, and due to the frequent use of her skill, her final skill priority is forte into skill into ultimate into basic attack into intro. For her weapons, her by far best in slot weapon is the standard 5-star Emerald of Genesis. Next up are the rank 5 Battle Pass weapon Looming Gloss and the rank 5 Commando of Conviction. Other possible options are the R5 craftable sword number 18, Lunar Cutter, or even a Sword of Night. However, the gap between any of these weapons and the standard 5-star is quite large. For her set, a 5-piece Sun-Sinking Eclipse with the Dreamless Echo is her best in slot, not only because the set is her best choice, but also because Dreamless is a freaking broken echo to use. Other options include mix-matching a 2-piece Sun-Sinking and 2-piece Lingering Tunes, or even a 5-piece Lingering Tunes with the Mech Abomination as your echo ability, if you plan on playing her as a hyper carry and stay on field with her. Switching her out while you do have a 5-piece Lingering Tunes will have her DPS decline drastically, as you cannot make full use of the 5-piece Lingering Tune set. Danjin has an absolute massive energy requirement of up to minus 35% depending on your team. So yeah, you don't need any ER on her, 0. That means we can fully focus on her damage output and hence prioritize crit rate or crit damage on her 4 cost, double Havoc or mix matching attack percent and Havoc for her 3 costs, and attack percent on her 1 cost echoes. An echo layout of 4-4-1-1-1 is also possible, but its damage ceiling is slightly lower than the classic 4-3-3-1-1. Nonetheless, it is a good early option while you farm for double 3 cost pieces, as the bosses and 1 cost echoes are much easier to acquire early on. For the substats, we want crit values first and foremost, followed by attack percent, and lastly heavy attack percent, skill damage percent, and flat attack. Liberation damage percent is usable as well, but not a stat you are mainly looking out for. If you roll ER percent while you don't really need it, as already previously mentioned, the worst case is your ultimate is up sooner, which means you can cast it more often, which again does result indeed in a little bit higher DPS, so it is not a wasted stat. Adding everything up, these are the final endgame stats I would recommend. Next up are her sequences. Danjin gains massive damage from her sequences, and a sequence 6 Danjin is nothing to scoff at, coming close if not even in damage with some other 5-star options. All her sequences are solely damage focused, but you will have the biggest gain from her sequence 1, 2 and 6. For her sequence 4, if you change your rotation and delay her ultimate a bit, you can expect another 2% damage increase over not delaying your ultimate, making sequence 4 even with her sequence 2. Her sequence 5 can reach higher numbers than shown on screen here, but it requires you to consistently stay below 60% HP, which is honestly really hard if you run any healer in your team, given that your forte also heals you. Before we cover her rotation, I have to make something very clear. Danjin massively benefits from dodge counters as well as from player skill, both of which will significantly increase her damage dealt. This also means any calculations I've done are on the lower end, and a Danjin in the hands of any good player in a real combat scenario will vastly outperform whatever my sheet says, as I cannot account for dodge counters in a static rotation, due to how the game works, as well as the rule set applied to all characters for these calculations. This basically means Danjin looks way worse on paper than she actually is. There is a reason many people play her, even solo. Furthermore, Danjin's main rotation does not need to be executed uninterrupted, and dodging or switching her out in between is perfectly fine and even recommended in certain teams. However, when using her in teams which grant her deep amplification buffs, consider that first before you switch to another character. That being said, let's now finally have a look at her main rotation. Intro into double skill Crimson Erosion, into ultimate, into 3 times basic, into triple skill Sanguine Pulse, into a single cast of her skill Carmine Gleam, into basics 2 and 3, into yet another triple skill Sanguine Pulse, into her forte Chaos Cleave, and finish it off with Scatterbloom. Depending on which echo you have equipped, you either want to use it directly before your ultimate in the case of Mech Abomination, or at the end before switching her out if you run her with Dreamless. As previously mentioned, you will very likely dodge or switch out, which hence will change your rotation. However, it is impossible in theory crafting to account for all possibilities. Hence, you can try to follow this rotation, but if you have to dodge, you are better off dodging instead of dying. A good rule of thumb to follow is to get in 2 Crimson Erosions to apply Incinerating Will around every 12 seconds, then prioritize using your ultimate whenever available, and if you can cast 3 basics into 3 Sanguine Pulse without dodging, that's a win. If you have to dodge, double cast Crimson Erosion right afterwards. If you care about optimizing her damage output, I would recommend you to either swap or dash cancel her Sanguine Pulse 3 as well as her Carmine Gleam. If you have her sequence 4, moving her ultimate down to use after the 3rd Sanguine Pulse can be a small damage gain as well. That being said, let's have a look at her teams. Danjin pairs exceptionally well with Havoc Rover and any support such as Verena, Baiji or Jianjing in a quickswap team. As Danjin is not bound to any fixed rotation or needs to stay on field, using her in quickswap rotations with Havoc Rover allows for many iframes, swap cancels, and overall a fantastic damage output, all while not only both can run the Dreamless Echo, but Danjin's outro can also grant Havoc Rover a lovely damage boost thanks to her outro. If you don't have Havoc Rover, just kidding, oh, of course you have. If you don't want to play Havoc Rover and Danjin in a quickswap tandem, Mortefi is a lovely support for hypercarry Danjin, not only due to his off-field damage, but also the 38% heavy damage amplification effect he provides with his outro for Danjin. Just keep in mind, if you play her as a hypercarry with Mortefi, you will need to stay on field with her to make full use of the buff Mortefi provides, especially for her forte. Instead of Mortefi, you can also play her in a double support team with Jianjing and Verena or Baiji. Jianjing provides some grouping and can fix your skill issues by providing a shield to Danjin, which may help you survive a hit while you are low HP. However, if you do have Danjin at sequence 5 or higher, as Jianjing's shield provides healing, you may lose out on 15% Havoc damage bonus occasionally, as you cannot guarantee staying below 60% health at all times. To be fair though, this however also applies to all healers you may bring, which means sequence 5 Danjin and upwards is significantly harder to play if you want to max out her potential. That all being said, thank you so much for watching, don't forget to leave a like and a comment on your thoughts on Danjin, subscribe for more Wuthering Waves content, join the Discord, and thanks again to Boot.dev for sponsoring this video. Peace!